Welcome to Train Signal. You're watching a video about Windows Server 2008 Server Core. In this video, we'll start off by taking a look at exactly what Server Core is, and then we'll go in and install and configure our Server Core computer. After we have it installed and configured, we'll talk a little bit about remote management and go in and see how to remotely manage our Server Core computer using either the Remote Server Administration Tools, or RSAT, or Remote Desktop. So what is Server Core? Well, Server Core is a version of Windows Server 2008, and actually I should say it is a set of versions. And the reason I say it's a set of versions is because Standard Edition, Enterprise Edition, and Data Center Edition all have a Server Core version. But I'll show you that when we get into the computer itself. Either way, Server Core does not provide you with a GUI desktop. GUI, GUI, stands for Graphic User Interface. So in other words, you're not going to see the standard desktop with a start menu and Explorer and all that good stuff. If you have Server Core installed, all you're going to have is the command shell, or some people refer to it as the command line or the command prompt, and you can only do very basic configuration tasks locally. And that's why we're going to talk about how to manage a Server Core computer remotely. It's because other than the few basic configuration tasks that you can do on the actual machine, everything else pretty much has to be done remotely. So why the heck would we want to use Server Core if it sounds like a pain, doesn't it? All you get is a command prompt. That's all you get, and you can't do everything from the machine? Well, there's two main reasons why you would use Server Core. Server Core should be used when you either have limited hardware available to you. Maybe you have an older computer that was using Windows 2000 and it met those requirements, but it does not meet the requirements of Server 2008 Full Edition. Well, another reason might be if you have a need for increased security on the individual box. Maybe the computer is in a location that is not very easy to secure. See, Server Core does not install all of the features that you'll find in the full version of Windows Server 2008. And so therefore, it does not require the resources that you would need to have with that full version. And likewise, since it doesn't have all those features, well, there's not nearly as much vulnerability if it's attacked. There's very minimal functionality within the actual Server Core computer. So if somebody wanted to attack that computer or try to hack in, well, they're going to have very limited capabilities. Alright, well, now it's time to actually get in there and take a look at what this all looks like. So in our Global Mantix network, in the New York office, we have an older computer laying around that we want to go ahead and utilize as a secondary DNS server to help meet the demands of all the clients on this network. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this older computer and install Windows Server 2008 Server Core. After we install the Server Core operating system, I'm going to then install something called the Core Configurator utility. Now this is a neat little utility that I found out on the internet that is presently free for use. And we're going to configure that Server Core computer using this utility. Now when you see this utility, you'll see why I like it so much. But here's what I need to tell you. At the moment, it's free and available for use. There's been talk that that may not be the case forever. But what I can tell you is that I fully expect that there will always be a variety of these utilities out there to assist you with the configuration of a Server Core computer, because it doesn't have a graphical user interface, and that's what Windows administrators are used to. So anyway, let's go do that all right now. Okay, so here we are, and this wonderful blank screen that you're looking at right now is actually the computer, that old computer that I was just telling you that we're going to set up with Server Core in the Global Mantix New York office. So let me go ahead and turn this machine on, and let's begin the installation. Now the one thing I should tell you is that the Windows Server 2008 DVD is already in the machine, and that's what we're booting off here. This is just an old blank machine that we wiped out. So in the beginning here, this is going to look just like what you saw a couple videos ago where we began the installation of Windows Server 2008. And here we have the welcome screen that we get, and we're going to pick our language and click Next. Click Install Now. And nothing has changed so far. Matter of fact, you're going to find that almost everything we're going to do here is going to be exactly the same thing that we saw when we learned how to install Server 2008 in the first place. But the one difference is when we get to the picking of versions, I don't know if you remember from before, but there were actually 6 to choose from: Standard, Enterprise, and Data Center. But then there was also the Core version. And here we go. Here we have Standard, Enterprise, and Data Center full installation. That's what we've been doing up till now. But in this case, I'm going to select the Enterprise Edition, just like we've had before, but we're going to do the Server Core installation. And select Next. Accept the license terms. Next. And again, we need to click this Custom Advanced, which installs a clean copy. And we need to select a hard drive or partition to do this on. And as with many of our other computers, this computer has a standard 80 gig hard drive in it. And that's okay. We'll just install right on that one 80 gig hard drive. We'll just make it one partition. So I'll click Next. And now you'll see that the process to install Windows has begun. And this is going to take, again, depending on the speed of your computer, 10, 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes to go ahead and copy, expand, install, and complete the installation, and may require a couple of reboots. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and pause the video, let this process complete, and what you're going to see when we come back is where things change. See, up till now, this is just installing Windows. What's the difference? Well, when we come back, you will see how the interface is different on Server Core. So I'll be right back with you in just a moment. Okay, as promised, I'm back. And as you can see, the installation has complete, and we are sitting here looking at a log on screen. The one thing I do want to mention, if you're following along, you may have noticed that this installation went by much quicker than previous installations. And again, the reason is because this is not a full version. This is a stripped down version of the operating system. So if we're not installing everything, it doesn't take as long to install. Anyway, let's go ahead and press Control-Alt-Delete to log on. And we need to pick a user to log in as. So I'll click Other User, and of course we'll use Administrator. And enter a password. And actually, you know what? That's not the password yet. Notice at this point there was no opportunity to enter a password, so the password is presently blank for the administrator. When I click the arrow here, now you get the message that we've seen before when installing the regular version, where you must change this password. So I'll click OK, and now I'll go ahead and enter in my secret password. All right. Now it's changing the password. It's been changed. I'll click OK, and now it's going to go ahead and log me in for the first time. Now this may take just a moment to go ahead and prepare the desktop for the first time. Even though the desktop's not going to be the same desktop that you're used to, it's still creating a profile. And so that first time you log in, it may take an extra moment. Okay, and there we go. We now have our desktop. Doesn't look like the desktop that we've seen before, does it? No, all we have is this command shell or command prompt window as we know it from the full version of Windows Server 2008. Okay, so now that we have the operating system installed, well, now we need to configure this server to do what we want it to do. And the way I want to do this is through this utility that I mentioned called the Core Configurator. Now, I have inserted a CD that has the Core Configurator utility on it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit D:, which should take me to my D drive, which is the CD-ROM drive. And if I do a dir, gives me the directory, and you'll see there's the Core Configurator 2.msi. So there's the installation file for this utility. Let me go ahead and type that in. And now it's going to go ahead and set up this utility. And you'll notice that even though we only have the command shell window, This version of Windows Server 2008 still gives us the ability to have a GUI for other things, just not the desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Next and just take the defaults here for everything. And now we have installed the Windows Server 2008 Core Configurator utility. And if you were paying attention while I clicked through those screens very quickly, you may have noticed that it was installing into the Program Files directory. So I'm going to hit CD /, which takes us to the root of our C drive. And then I'll do a dir just to show you. Here you'll see there is a Program Files directory. The way you change directory, again, is CD for change directory, Program Files. Once in the Program Files directory, I'll hit a dir, and you'll see here there's a directory for Core Configurator. So CD Core Configurator. Do a dir once again, and here we have the Core Configurator executable. So Core Configurator. You can type the .exe, but it's not necessary. It assumes .exe for executable. And now I get a graphical user way, kind of setting up this machine. So I could go through and set up activation, where you set up the product key that you're going to use, since obviously we don't do that during installation. I will skip that for right now. We'll worry about that later. You can set up your display, time zone. So actually I'm going to click on the ones that matter to us right now. Time zone as a for instance. Because this is in New York, we need to go ahead and change from the default of Pacific time, and we need to go to Eastern time. And click OK. Here we have RDP, which stands for Remote Desktop Configuration. Now this is something that we're going to get into a little bit later on in the video, but as long as we're here, I'll click on it and set it up. When I click on this, I'm going to say that I want to allow remote administration connections, as well as allowing connections from previous versions of Windows, so all versions of remote desktop should work. I'll click Save. We could set up users and groups if we needed to. And here we can set up our firewall. Now by default, the firewall is on and essentially is blocking everything. So I'm going to click on this link, and you'll see here that there are certain rule groups that you can set up, meaning we're going to allow these things to go ahead and pass through the firewall. So I'm going to say I want to allow remote administration, because we're going to be doing that. I'm going to allow remote desktop, because we're going to be doing that. And that should be pretty much all we need to go ahead and allow remote management. As you can see, there are a number of other things that we can allow to come through this firewall if we want this particular computer to participate in those areas of management. So I'm going to go ahead and click Enable Selected Rule Groups. It tells me that they've been successfully enabled. Click OK. Close this window. We don't need WinRM. Networking. For our local area connection, we're going to obtain an IP address automatically and DNS server address automatically, and that's okay. We'll leave it that way because we already have a DHCP server previously set up to hand us this information. So I don't need to worry about that. If I go to computer name, however, we need to give this computer a name. We don't want just some random default name. So I'm going to call this computer New York, and we'll call this MEM2-core. And the reason I'm calling it MEM2 is because even though at this point in the course we haven't set up MEM1 yet, we haven't set up that first member server, well, we're going to. We're going to actually very soon. We already have member servers in the Global Mantix network. We just haven't physically set them up here as far as the course goes. So we're going to say this is a secondary member server, and I'm going to put -core to let us know it's a core edition of the installation. What we also need to do is go ahead and join the Global Mantix domain. But you'll see here, I can't actually do it. If I click, this is grayed out. It's not going to let me do this because we're in the midst of changing the computer name first. So let me go ahead and click OK. And it tells you that the name has been changed, but in order for these changes to take effect, you must reboot. So as opposed to the full version where we can do the name and the domain membership at the same time, in Core, it's not as easy to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and click Yes to reboot the computer. It tells me it's going to shut down in less than a minute. That's wonderful to know. So the computer's going to reboot. There it goes. And it'll take just a moment to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and come right back with you as soon as it's complete. Okay, the reboot is complete. Again, if you're following along, you may have noticed that even booting the computer goes much faster because there's just not as much to load in this basic stripped down version of Windows Server 2008. So I'll press Control-Alt-Delete to log in, enter my super secret password, and wait for my wonderful Command Shell desktop to reappear. And there we go. We're back to our original Command Shell. That's all we have. So now I'm going to go ahead and I need to cd / to change directories back to the root, cd program files, and then cd core configurator, and then run the core configurator. And now we can continue where we left off. So I'm going to click on the computer name button again. And this time, I'm going to go ahead and join the globalmantics.com domain. So I'll enter in that domain, click OK. Now it wants credentials, so I'll go ahead and enter my administrator credentials for the domain. And now it tells me that I have successfully joined the domain, and guess what? I have to reboot again. So yes, go ahead and reboot. It'll shut down in less than a minute. It's going to do so just momentarily. And once again, I will pause the video and come right back with you as soon as it's done rebooting. Okay, the computer has finished rebooting, so I'm going to press Control-Alt-Delete to log on. Enter my super secret password. And wait for my Shell desktop to appear. And there we go. Right back where we started again. So let me go ahead and get us back into the appropriate directory. And watch this. Program files, put in our / core configurator. You can go straight to that directory. You don't have to go step by step like I was doing in the past. Go ahead and run the core configurator utility. All right, we're through almost all our buttons here, but now we're up to possibly one of the most significant buttons, which is the Features button. And even though it says Features, it actually means Roles and Features. So let me click on the button. And you'll see here that it takes us into Server Features and Roles. And there's a number of different features and roles that this particular server can be. Okay, so what we're looking for is the DNS server role, right? Because that's what we decided that this computer was going to be used for, as a secondary DNS server to our globalmantics.com domain in New York. So I'm going to check the box right here where it says DNS server core role and click configure. Now this is kind of interesting because you'll notice it's telling you the exact command that it's executing. And that's one thing I'd like to point out right now while we're waiting for this. And really, we're not waiting. It's done. Or actually, I should say, now it's done. But anyway, if you don't have a utility like this core configurator utility, then you're going to have to become very familiar with the command line interface and know all the syntax that needs to be used to go ahead and add and remove roles and do all the various things that we've just done over the last few minutes. That's why utilities like this come in so handy. So anyway, it has been configured, so I'm going to go ahead and click close. And the only other button that's left here as far as configuring goes is DC promo. Now we're not going to do a DC promo because this would turn this computer into an Active Directory domain controller, and that's not what our interest is right now. If you have a server core computer and you want it to be a domain controller, you could do so through this DC promo button. But in the meantime, all we really have left to do is either shut down the computer, reboot the computer, or just exit right out of this utility. So I'm going to click exit, and I will tell you that at this point we have successfully installed Windows Server 2008 Server Core. We have installed the Core Configurator utility, and we have now configured this server to be a DNS server. Now, it's not actually set up to be exactly what it's supposed to be. It's not truly a secondary DNS server to the globalmantics.com domain yet, and that's something that has to be done through remote management on another computer. So, let's go talk a little bit about remote management, and then we'll come back and see how to make that all work. Alright, well, when it comes to remote management, there's two general choices that we can use. And one would be the Remote Server Administration Tools, or RSAT, or we can use Remote Desktop. So let's take a look at each one. First of all, the Remote Server Administration Tools. Well, in order to use RSAT on a Vista client, it's going to require that you have Vista with Service Pack 1. And I mentioned Vista Client because this particular utility cannot be used on Windows XP. If you want to use Windows XP as your client, then you're going to need the old admin pack that we used to have that gave you the remote administration tools for Windows XP. So that's one thing to keep in mind. You not only need Vista, but you need Vista with Service Pack 1, and you cannot do this on Windows XP. Now, we can also remotely administrate this server from another Windows Server 2008 computer. So it doesn't necessarily have to be from a client, but what we're going to look at here is doing it from a client computer, because that's what many administrators like to do. Basically, servers exist where in a company? That's right, in the server room. And the server rooms are usually cold, unfriendly. You usually have to stand at a rack that has a pull-out keyboard and sometimes a rollerball for a mouse. Whereas if we can remotely administrate computers from the comfort of our own desk with our own computer, well, that makes a lot more sense. So that's why we're going to look at this from a client point of view. Now, you can download the Remote Server Administration Tools from the Microsoft Download Center, and we'll actually take a look at that in just a moment. I'll show you. We'll go to the Microsoft Download Center, and we will download and install RSAT on a Vista client. And when should you use RSAT? You should use it when you want to do remote management using the Microsoft Management Console, or MMC. So as a for instance, in just a few moments, we're going to go in and we want to remotely set up the DNS server. And DNS servers are managed through the DNS server MMC. So RSAT would be a way to accomplish that goal. Now, the other way we can remotely administrate a server is through a remote desktop. And the remote desktop is actually pretty cool. It actually puts you on the actual desktop of the remote server. So sitting at your own desk on your own monitor will appear the desktop of the server that you're trying to administrate. And when should you use it? Well, basically when you're unable to manage using RSAT. So you can't do everything through the MMC. There are certain things you just have to be at the computer. And again, who wants to actually go into the server room and stand, in that uncomfortable environment? So that's when remote desktop will be used. And you may recall that in previous videos when we set up our servers, and even in this video with Server Core, we've already enabled the server side of remote desktop. Now I'll take you back in and show you where we set that up on the other servers. But then we're going to take a look at how to make the remote desktop connection in Vista. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and do that now? We're going to go ahead and, actually before we can remotely access the server core using RSAT, we need to go to Microsoft and download it. So we'll do that first, and then we will connect using those utilities. And then we will also set up a remote desktop connection and access those servers in that fashion. All right, let's go do that now. Okay, here I am on a Vista client, and I will tell you that the computer that I'm on right now is not one that I have instructed you at this point to set up. So if you are following along, you are going to need to set up a Vista client. It really doesn't matter what version you use. You just need a basic installation of Vista, and then you need to go ahead and, in my case, I named this computer New York Vista 1 to represent one of the Vista clients in the New York office. And I've then, of course, made it a member of the globalmantics.com domain. So if you don't have a Vista client, go ahead and install it now. Pause the video while you're doing so, and then come back here and continue, and you'll be able to follow along. So what I'm going to do is press Control-Alt-Delete to log on. And then I'm going to go ahead and log on as the Global Mantix Administrator. And the first thing we need to do if we want to remotely administrate machines using RSAT is go to Microsoft and download the RSAT utility. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my Internet Explorer link, and then I'm going to connect to the Microsoft.com website. On the Microsoft.com website, I will put my cursor over Downloads and Trials and go to the Download Center. Once in the Download Center, let's see here, we don't need to try this beta out. We want to go ahead and search, and I'm just going to put in RSAT and click Go. And what you'll see here is that right out the gates we have the Remote Server Administration Tools for Windows Vista 32-bit edition. Now one thing I need to point out is that there is a different utility for the 32-bit edition than there is for the 64-bit edition, which is right down here. Okay, now this version that I'm running right now is 32-bit, so I'm going to click on this link. It says that a validation is required. They want to make sure I'm legit before they give me these tools, so I'll click Continue. And, don't show me that anymore. I know how this all works. They want me to go ahead and install the ActiveX control, which I'm going to do so that they can validate that I'm for real. Click Install. And there we go. And now that we've been validated, now we can actually go ahead and download the software. So I'll click Download. I'm going to save this file right here to my local computer. And pretty much I'm going to browse folders, and how about we just put it right on the desktop? I don't need to put it anywhere special. I'm going to put it right on the desktop, click Save. And you'll see here that it's not very big. It's only just under 18 megabytes, and depending on the speed of your internet connection, it shouldn't take too long to download. In this case, it looks like I had one little hiccup, but now it's going quickly again. We're down to 7 seconds left, so bear with me a second. And looks like we are pretty much done. There we go. I'll click Close. It thanks me for downloading. You're welcome, Microsoft. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of that window. And you'll see right here that we now have the package to install the Remote Server Administration Tools. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on that utility. And it's going to go out there and search for updates to the installer. I'll click OK to install this update. And I will tell you, this right here, this knowledge base number, this is the same. This is the number for the Remote Server Administration Tools themselves. So I'll click OK. I want to do this. I have to accept to the terms. And now the updates are being installed. And as much as it may seem like this is no real big deal and there's not a lot to this, well, this is going to take a while. I've seen it go as fast as just a couple, 2, 3, maybe 5 minutes, and I've also seen it take as long as 10, 20, 30 minutes. So depending on the speed of your computer, I don't know how long it's going to take. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and I'll come back as soon as this is complete. Alright, the installation is now complete, so I'm going to go ahead and click on Close. And this package right here, at this point you could delete it, knowing you can download it again in the future, or you might want to archive it away to have it for future needs. In this case, I'll just leave it right on the desktop. It's really not hurting anything on this computer for right now. What I now need to do is I need to go ahead and install and set up these Remote Server Administration Tools. So I'm going to click on Start, and I need to go to the Control Panel. In the Control Panel, we need to go ahead and click on the Programs applet, or let me show you this. I know some administrators like the classic view. Actually, I happen to be one of those administrators. In the classic view, then you want to go to Programs and Features. Should take you to the same place. Once you're in Programs and Features, you then want to click on the link for Turn Windows Features on or off. And this will take just a brief moment here while it pretty much scans through and looks for what features you have available and which ones have already been installed, etc., etc. Now, the one that we're looking for here are the remote server administration tools. Now, we can go ahead and just check this box, but let me go ahead and expand this so you can see what this consists of. It consists of feature administration tools and role administration tools. So are you remotely administrating roles or features? And if I expand each of those, there's roles and features, you'll see that there's a lot of them to choose from. And in this case, well, we want to remotely administrate DNS. Now, some people find that it's easier just to go ahead and check the box saying, just give me all the remote server administration tools. And really, there's no absolute harm in that, other than the fact that your client computer now will have a link to go ahead and administrate all these other things. And so on the chance that somebody were to accidentally come across this computer, whether it's via attack or maybe someone just sits down at the machine, whatever it may be, you really don't want to give them more than they need. So I'm going to go ahead and say just DNS server. That's all we need to do right now. And I'll click OK. And you'll see here it says, please wait while these features are configured. It might take several minutes. Now, I don't think that this one's going to take several minutes because it's just the one feature. But you never know. Sometimes when you see these boxes, you sit here wondering, I wonder how long they really mean when they say several minutes. Well, anyway, I think I've talked long enough trying to delay and let these several minutes pass. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and come right back as soon as those several minutes have passed. Okay, the several minutes have passed, and now that feature has been installed. The only other thing that we're going to want to do, and let me go ahead and close out of Programs and Features, is we want to have it added to the Start menu. So what I'm going to do is right-click on Start and go to Properties. And now, under the customization of the Start menu, I'm going to go ahead and click on that link. If I scroll down, I need to go ahead and right here where it says System Administrative Tools, go ahead and display on the Programs menu, or I could even put it right on the Start menu. How about that? We'll put it right there. Click OK, and click OK again. And now I can click Start, and you'll see here I have Administrative Tools. And now, as part of my Administrative Tools, I have DNS. Now, I will tell you, if you don't want to have this on your Start menu, that is perfectly okay. Matter of fact, Microsoft recommends that it's not a good idea. That's why it's not there by default. What you would do is just go back to the control panel, and then in the control panel, you could access your administrative tools that way, and then get to DNS there. I personally like having it on the Start menu. It's a lot more convenient. So if I know that this is my computer and I'm going to be doing these remote administration tasks, I want to have it on my computer. So I'm going to click Start, and I'm going to go to Administrative Tools and select DNS. Now it wants to know, well, what computer do we want to manage DNS? Well, I'm going to actually look at two computers. One computer that I'm going to look at is going to be New York DC1 2K8. Let me click OK. And the reason I'm managing New York DC1 is because in order to set this server core computer that we've been working with up as a secondary, we're going to need to configure certain things on the master, as it's referred to, sometimes thought of as a primary, although in this case, really technically, it's more of a master, because on New York DC1, we have what's called an Active Directory integrated zone, as opposed to a standard primary. But then we also need to manage the server core computer. So I'm going to right-click on DNS up here and connect to another DNS server. And this time it's going to be New York MEM2-core. And click OK. And now I can manage both DNS servers from right here. Now, on New York MEM2 core, let me expand that. And I'll expand forward lookup zones. Now you'll notice it's blank because we haven't configured it yet. So we're going to configure it at this point. Now I need to tell you, you'll by all means, please follow along with what I'm doing, but the purpose right now is not so much to learn DNS. So there are things here you may or may not understand depending on your current knowledge of how DNS servers work. But I'll give you all the steps that I'm doing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on forward lookup zones, and select New Zone. In the New Zone wizard, I'm going to go ahead and click on Next. And now, as we had mentioned before, we're going to make this a secondary zone, which is a read-only copy of the DNS database so that we can help answer queries from our clients. And that's what we're trying to do here. So I'll click Next. And we have to give the zone a name. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually browse for the zone name. I could type in globalmantics.com. That's what we're trying to look at here. But just to show you, I'm going to browse. I'm going to browse New York DC1. That's where the zone is right now. Click OK. Forward lookup zones. Here's our globalmantics. If I expand this, globalmantics.com zone. Click OK. There you go. I could have typed it in. It really doesn't matter. Click Next. And now it wants to know who is my master. Okay, and that's what I was referring to. So I'm going to go ahead and put in New York-DC1-2K8. And you'll notice I'm getting some errors here. And actually, as far as the IPv6 version, we can go ahead and delete that one. We're only worried about IPv4. And we're getting a validation error, which does tend to happen sometimes when you're going through the wizard. But you'll see that this will clean itself up in just a few minutes. So I'm going to click Next and Finish. And now I have the globalmantics.com zone on my New York Member 2 core server computer. And when I click on it, zone's not loaded by the DNS server. Well, the reason why it's not loaded is because our master, New York DC1, is not allowing it. And that's what I was talking to you about before as far as why I'm going to manage New York DC1 from this location. And so I'm going to expand forward lookup zones. And then I'm going to right click on globalmantics.com and go to its properties. And when I do, if I go to there's a couple things I want to do. One, I'm going to go to the name servers tab, and I need to add another server that is going to be authorized to go ahead, and you'll see in a minute, I'm going to make it that everybody on the name servers tab is going to be authorized to receive zone transfers. So I'm going to go ahead and add New York mem2 core.globalmantics.com. And I'll click resolve. Now again, we're getting some errors here, and if we go on, you'll see this is not authoritative for the required zone. That's okay, because it's going to become authoritative. Okay, we're going to make that all happen. It's kind of a weird situation where you have to go through the whole process and then all the red X's go away. So I'm going to go to the Zone Transfers tab, and I'm going to allow zone transfers to the servers listed on the Name Servers tab. Now, another option I had would be do it only to the following servers and put in the specific server right here. But I want to go ahead and allow zone transfers to the Name Servers tab. I could also say, yeah, go ahead and allow zone transfers to anybody. But that would create a security hole, because anybody who comes in contact with this DNS server could go ahead and, with just a little bit of skill, go ahead and request that zone transfer and get your entire DNS database. Now, in case you completely don't understand what a DNS database is, it's pretty much all of the IP to name and name to IP resolution. Okay, so it's a good way for somebody to get an entire footprint, really, of the computers on your network. So I'm going to go ahead and say only the servers listed on the Name Servers tab. I will click OK. And now New York DC1 should be willing to cooperate. We'll find out in just a moment. I'm going to come down here back to New York mem2-core and go to the globalmantics.com. I'm going to right click and ask to transfer from master. I'll click that now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go back up here to forward lookup zones. I'm going to refresh the screen and click on globalmantics.com again. And now we have all the information loaded. We have successfully set up New York Member 2 Core as a server core computer running as a secondary DNS server for the globalmantics.com domain. All right, now let me go ahead and close out of the DNS manager, because the one last thing that I said I would show you, I told you I would show you how to do remote desktop management. So what we want to do here is, well, first of all, New York DC1, we already set it up for remote desktop capabilities when we installed it. So really all we have to do is here on our Vista client, click Start, All Programs, and then go to Accessories, and then here you will find Remote Desktop Connection. In the Remote Desktop Connection window, we can go ahead and type in New York DC1 2K8, the name of the computer. Or you could put in the IP address too. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to go ahead and click Connect. And now it wants the credentials to be able to go ahead and log into that computer. So I will go ahead and enter those now. I could tell it to remember my credentials, which means every time I try to connect going forward, it will automatically enter this. That can be dangerous, but can also come in handy depending on the exact situation that you're in. I'm going to choose not to remember the credentials right now because in a little bit I'm going to show you where else this can be done. I'll click OK. Uh-oh, credentials didn't work. Aha! What we want to do is go ahead and, instead of doing the local administrator, let's go ahead and do the Global Mantix administrator and put in the password. And now we are going ahead and remote desktop connecting to New York DC1. And as you can see, there's a little tab up at the top of the screen that tells you that this is the computer we're now looking at. See, if I minimize that tab, here's that Vista client, right? Here's our icon still on the Vista desktop. But if I go back to it, now I'm looking at New York DC1. And I can do everything. I can click Start. I can go to my administrative tools. I can go to, hey, there's DNS. And now I'm looking at the DNS utility on that computer. Now let me go ahead and close out of there. The way, just to kind of remind you, the way that we set up remote desktop capabilities on New York DC1 was through the initial configuration task wizard when we first installed the operating system. If we did not set it up at that point, then what you would do is click on Start, right-click on the computer, and go to Properties. In here, in the System utility, here we have a link for Remote Settings. I'm going to click that link, and it's right here that you can choose. By default, it will say Don't allow connections to this computer. We can choose to allow connections from this computer running any version of Remote Desktop, or we can allow only with the latest version, which has network level authentication. Now, if I know I'm using Vista clients, I could do this last choice. The reason I did the middle choice here is because the computer that I am going to be connecting to this machine from very often, for the sake of this course, is actually a Windows XP computer. And that's why I needed to allow that in this case. All right, so let me go ahead and cancel out of this screen. We don't want to change that, of course, because we'll lose our remote desktop connection. I'm going to cancel out of here, and a couple things I want to tell you about remote desktop connections. If you just click this X right here to close the connection, it's going to tell you that it will disconnect your session, but everything will continue to run. The session is still running. So if you truly want to end the session, you would log out just as you would if you were actually on the computer itself. That would completely close the session. Now, to show you that this is true, I'm going to actually close the session, click OK to that message, and now I'm going to go ahead and select Remote Desktop Connection, connect back to that computer again, enter my password, and you will notice that this time it logs me straight back in, and I'm right where I was. I still have that same program running. So let me go ahead and close that now and log off of the computer so we completely close the session. This is something I want you to always keep in mind, because there is a significance to when you should log off and when you should disconnect. Logging off should be done most of the time if you are truly done with the computer. Disconnecting is a great idea if you know that it's just temporary and you're going to come right back to what you're doing, but understand that resources are going to still be tied up. Now, the next thing I want to show you about remote desktop connections is, first of all, it may not always be right here on your start menu. You could pin it up top here, but otherwise you have to click to all programs and then go to accessories and then go to remote desktop connection. And that's not a whole lot of fun. So another thing that we can do, and I'm going to go back into it, is I'm going to click on options. And in here, we can go ahead and enter the computer name, and we can put in a username, and we could choose to save the credentials. Okay, and by doing that, that means that now when I enter the credentials, I'll have that opportunity again to save them, and they won't have to be asked again and again and again. There are some additional things that we can do, like we can control what the display is going to look like, and in this case, we're doing a full screen. That's why the whole screen takes over and we get our little tab at the top. Or we could do just a window. We could do a window inside of this Vista client window. We could also bring certain local resources to the remote connection. So we may want to go ahead and bring certain things from the local Vista client to our remote session. We can start a program when we connect. We can control our experience. We can make the experience a little better or a little worse. Matter of fact, in this case, I'll go ahead and say we're on a LAN, which means now we get all the boxes checked and things will go much smoother than they did before. Whereas if I am connecting over an old slow modem or some kind of slow WAN link, right? We could do that, and then it's not going to carry over certain things because that would use up too much bandwidth. And then we also have the ability to have a little bit of additional control, and some of this we'll actually get into later on in this course, like this right here, TS Gateway. But for right now, we don't need to worry about this. The main thing I want you to see is on the General tab that I can click Save As. And when I click Save As, and I'm going to go ahead and go to my desktop, and I'm going to go ahead and type in New York DC 1 and click Save. Now, I have an icon right on my desktop, right? If I know I manage that computer all the time, I can just double click that icon. Don't worry about that message in the future. This is just giving me a quick warning about it not being identified, but it'll be identified going forward. And click Connect. I'm going to enter my password. And this time I will say to remember the credentials. And we are connected. I didn't have to locate it on the Start menu. Now, not only did I not have to locate it on the Start menu, but because I told it to go ahead and remember my credentials, let me go ahead and start something here. I'm going to click Start, and we'll just open up Notepad. Right? We've got a Notepad window open. I'm going to close this. I can just double click here, and it's going to reconnect back and not ask me anything. So if this is a machine you regularly are going to do this with, that's the way to do it. Save the connection so that you can access it quickly and easily. And again, notice that Notepad is still there because I didn't log off. I disconnected. So let me go ahead and close this. Click Start. Log off. And the only other thing that I want to show you now is I'm going to open up another remote desktop connection, and I'm going to show you that we can remotely connect via remote desktop to our server core computer. But it doesn't really serve a great purpose. Let me go ahead and Global Mantics, Administrator. And the reason I say that it doesn't serve a great purpose is because, again, remember, this is like putting myself locally on the server core computer. And, well, the server core computer, you can't do much locally. So here we are at the server core desktop now, just like we had before. But again, it's still just going to be that command shell. And all we can do is basic configuration. Now, the one thing I want to tell you about connecting to a server core computer via remote desktop is that there's one minor dilemma, and that dilemma is there's no start menu to go ahead and log off with. So it can be a bit tricky. And so one little trick is that there is a utility built in here called the shutdown utility. And I'll just do shutdown /?, which, by the way, if you're getting familiar with the command prompt and you have not used it heavily in the past, one of the nice features is that you can always do /? To get help. So here, if I scroll back up, you'll see that there are a number of switches we can do with the shutdown command, and what we're looking for is this one right here, /L for logging off. So what I can do is go ahead and type in shutdown /L, and now it's going to go ahead and log me out of that session. Otherwise, if we just close it, that session will continue to run in the background, and that's not really something that we want to have happen. So that's how you can remotely administrate your servers using either the RSAT tools or remote desktop connections. Alright, well, that's pretty much all I have for you in this video. And at this point, you should now know how to explain what Server Core is and when you would want to use it. You should know how to install the Server Core versions of Windows Server 2008. And you should know how to remotely access these servers using either RSAT or remote desktop. Alright, well, go give yourself a break, and I will see you in the next video.